Everyone you meet wants something from you. Some want your time, others want your energy. Some crave your approval, while others secretly want to use your silence as permission to take more than you offered. Have you noticed how rarely anyone asks who you really are when all they want is what you can give? And here lies the quiet burden of existence. To be seen not as a soul, but as a function, to be treated not as a being, but as a utility. So the question becomes, how do you live in a world where every handshake hides a motive, every smile may carry an agenda, and every conversation may be a subtle negotiation? Do you bend? Do you harden? Or do you learn to see before others speak? To feel the intention behind the words, the hunger behind the mask, the shadow behind the light? This is not paranoia. This is wisdom. Life teaches us again and again that most people do not approach with selfless love. They approach with unspoken need. And the ones who survive, no, the ones who thrive, are those who learn to read this game without resentment, without hatred, but with silent clarity. We grow up in side stories told to us before we even understand the weight of their meaning. Stories about kindness, generosity, and trust. Stories that condition us to believe that good people always give and better people give even more. The narrative is romantic and comforting. It paints a world where every act of selflessness is reciprocated, where every open heart is protected, and where every sacrifice is honored. But life rarely unfolds like that. Instead, what begins as innocent belief often hardens into painful realization. People notice those who give, but not always with gratitude. Many notice with calculation. They see someone easy to lean on, someone who will bend before breaking, someone whose sense of duty outweighs their sense of boundaries. And so the noble becomes exploitable. What was taught as a virtue quietly morphs into a vulnerability, leaving you not elevated, but depleted. This is the first fracture in the story, the dissonance between what you were told about human nature and what you begin to experience. The misconception lies in assuming that people value you for your essence, for who you are at the core of your being. It is comforting to think that others admire your spirit, your authenticity, or your character. Yet, if you observe closely, admiration often arrives only when you are serving their needs, when you make them feel seen, when you provide them comfort, when you offer them time or resources. They admire you, but strip away the service, and the admiration vanishes like mist at dawn. This realization stings because it makes you question whether any relationship is truly selfless. The truth, as psychology and philosophy both whisper, is that humans are largely driven by self-interest. They may dress it in beautiful words, they may even believe it themselves, but beneath every request, beneath every gesture, there often lies a need, sometimes simple, sometimes manipulative, but rarely absent. To ignore this reality is to invite exhaustion. You begin to carry weight that was never meant to be yours. Think of the endless yes that tumbles from your mouth when someone asks for help, even when your chest is heavy with your own struggles. Think of the guilt that presses down when you finally dare to decline. That guilt is not born from morality, it is born from conditioning. You were taught that to say no is selfish, and selfishness was painted as the ultimate sin. Yet the irony is clear. While you drown under the weight of always being available, those who take never feel guilty for asking. They do not carry the same burden. They do not wrestle with the same inner war. In fact, they thrive on your hesitation, knowing that your need to be seen as good will always outpace your need to be protected. This imbalance is not accidental. It is systemic. It is how society ensures that the compliant keep bending while the cunning keep rising. Machiavelli, centuries ago, stripped the mask from this human theater. He warned that people are not angels, they are driven by desires, by fears, and by self-preservation. He argued that a ruler who forgets this will be devoured, for trust without calculation is naive. Many recoil from his words, calling them cruel or cynical, yet they endure because they reveal a harsh but enduring truth. People act according to what benefits them, even when it means sacrificing you. To live unaware of this is to walk blindfolded into a battlefield, armed with nothing but hope. Hope has its place, but hope alone does not shield you from arrows. What protects you is clarity, knowing that most interactions, no matter how warm, contain an element of transaction. When you see this, you stop expecting unconditional loyalty from those who never had reason to offer it. You stop confusing politeness for care, attention for affection, and proximity for love. The misconception extends deeper. It tells you that giving more will eventually secure love, loyalty, or permanence. You are led to believe that if you just stay available, if you just keep pouring yourself out, one day someone will recognize the depth of your heart and finally give back in equal measure. But this rarely happens. Instead, the pattern repeats. The more you give, the more people expect. What begins as appreciation turns into entitlement. Your kindness becomes invisible because it is no longer viewed as kindness, it is viewed as duty. You are no longer thanked for your sacrifice because your sacrifice is assumed. The tragedy is that while you wait for recognition, you train others to consume you without pause. This is how the cycle of quiet exploitation sustains itself. Not through grand betrayals, but through the slow erosion of your boundaries under the disguise of normalcy. What makes this cycle so dangerous is its subtlety. It is not always the overt manipulator who drains you. It is often the smiling acquaintance, the polite colleague, the well-meaning friend who unknowingly leans on you without balance. And because they are not cruel in obvious ways, you hesitate to question it. You tell yourself you're imagining it, that you're being dramatic, that a good person doesn't keep score. Yet deep inside, a quiet resentment grows. It is not resentment toward them, but resentment toward yourself. For always silencing your own needs, for always prioritizing theirs. The conflict is not external but internal, a battle between who you were taught to be and who you need to become. The world applauds your giving nature while quietly benefiting from your silence, and you begin to see that what is praised is not always what is healthy. Philosophy and psychology converge here to reveal the core of the problem. People project their hunger onto others, and they will continue to do so until they meet resistance. If you are soft, they will mold you to their shape. If you are endlessly available, they will endlessly take. This is not because they are inherently evil. It is because human nature tends towards self-preservation first. Recognizing this does not make you bitter. It makes you wise. It allows you to navigate relationships with open eyes instead of illusions. And when you finally see the pattern for what it is, you understand why so many feel drained, why so many feel unseen, why so many walk through life quietly bleeding out their energy. The misconception has always been that people love you for you. The truth is simpler, sharper, and less comfortable. Most love you for what you provide. And until you see it clearly, you will keep giving pieces of yourself away to those who were never looking at you in the first place. Think back to the countless times you said yes while every nerve inside you whispered no. You didn't want to go, you didn't want to help, you didn't have the energy to listen again to the same story, but you forced yourself because you were afraid of what might happen if you refused. You feared disappointing someone, feared being misunderstood, feared being labeled selfish. So you swallowed the discomfort, silenced the resistance, and complied. And afterward, you sat with the quiet ache of resentment, asking yourself why you never spoke up, why your boundaries collapse the moment they are tested. This cycle is familiar to so many of us. It becomes the invisible routine of our relationships. We don't realize that each small surrender carves a deeper wound, a wound that doesn't bleed but drains us slowly, leaving us weaker than before. There are moments you walk away from gatherings or conversations and realize you were not truly there as a person but as a role. You were the listener, the supporter, the problem solver, the steady hand. People thanked you for being there but rarely asked what it cost you to stay. They smiled and said you are strong, dependable, reliable. But beneath the compliments was a hidden truth. They did not see your strength. They saw their convenience. They admired your ability to hold space, but not your need for space of your own. It is a painful realization because it forces you to confront that sometimes what feels like love or friendship is simply the fulfillment of a function. You begin to wonder if anyone would still come to you if you stopped offering so much of yourself. The hardest realizations often come when you are forgotten. Forgotten after giving your all. Forgotten after showing up again and again. Once the need is met, once the crisis is over, the silence begins. Calls stop coming, texts go unanswered, and suddenly the urgency with which you were sought disappears. You realize they didn't want you, they wanted what you carried. And when you can no longer provide it, They drift. This truth cuts deep because it feels like rejection, but it is more subtle than that. It is not that they rejected you, but that they never truly saw you beyond your usefulness. And in that clarity, you begin to see patterns repeating across friendships, family, even work. The painful question echoes, how many of the connections I cherish are built not on who I am, but on what I can offer? There are also the silent sacrifices. The nights you stayed awake comforting someone when you were drowning yourself. The money you gave even when your own bills were unpaid. The time you carved out while neglecting your own dreams. These moments become invisible, almost erased from memory, because they are expected rather than acknowledged. People remember what you failed to do more than what you gave. They criticize your one absence while forgetting your 100 presences. And you internalize this imbalance, convincing yourself you must try harder, give more, prove your worth again. This endless loop of overgiving and under-recognition creates a deep exhaustion, a hollowing out of the spirit. It becomes a quiet despair, not dramatic enough to announce, but steady enough to erode your sense of self. But transformation arrives quietly, often in small, unexpected realizations. The moment you say no for the first time and notice the world doesn't collapse. The moment someone reacts with anger to your refusal and you suddenly see their true colors revealed. The moment you realize that those who value you only when you comply never valued you at all. These realizations sting, but they are liberating. They pull the curtain away from illusions you've carried for years. You begin to understand that love without respect is not love, that friendship without reciprocity is not friendship, that presence without care is not connection. And once you taste that clarity, even in small doses, you can never go back to blindness. It is not just about others, it is also about yourself. You start to see how much of your identity was tied to being needed, how many times you confused being useful with being loved, how many times you measured your value by how much you could carry for others. The emptiness you felt when they left was not just about them. It was about you not knowing who you were when you were no longer serving someone else's script. This realization is painful, but it is also a doorway. Because when you see it, you begin to rebuild a self not dependent on constant giving. A self that can exist in solitude without apology. The transformation is not instant, but it begins the moment you acknowledge, I am more than what I provide. As this awareness deepens, social criticism naturally follows. You begin to notice how society praises the giver but rarely protects them. How entire systems are built on the backs of those who are too afraid to refuse. Workplaces rely on employees who overextend themselves. Families lean on the silent sacrificer. Communities uphold those who never say no, and the irony is bitter. Those who give the most are often the least defended. They are told they are noble, while quietly being consumed. Seeing this clearly can be both infuriating and freeing. It gives you the courage to step outside the game, to question why your worth has been tied to depletion, to challenge the quiet exploitation that has been normalized as love, loyalty, or duty. And in that moment you reclaim something sacred, the right to exist for yourself, not just for what others demand. There comes a point when exhaustion itself becomes your teacher. You reach a threshold where giving more is no longer possible, and in that breaking point something shifts. You realize silence is not weakness. It is space, a sacred ground where clarity grows. In solitude you begin to feel the texture of your own presence again. You hear the thoughts you drowned out with noise, you feel the emotions you buried beneath responsibility, and as the stillness deepens, you notice a new kind of strength forming. Not the strength to carry more, but the strength to carry less, to refuse, to protect. Solitude sharpens you. It gives you sight others do not have, because while they are busy filling their lives with endless demands, you are learning to see the intentions behind them. Silence becomes your armor, and awareness becomes your shield. In this space, motives reveal themselves before words are spoken. You begin to sense the hunger behind flattery, the calculation behind charm, the unspoken request wrapped in kindness. Where before you were blind to these currents, now they are as clear as shadows in the light. This is not bitterness, it is perception. It is like standing in a darkened room and slowly realizing your eyes have adjusted. What others stumble through, you navigate with ease. You are no longer taken off guard by sudden requests or manipulations, because you feel them before they arrive. This awakening does not make you hard, it makes you precise. You can still be kind, but now your kindness is chosen, not extracted. You can still give, but now your giving flows from strength, not obligation. The imagery of scars fits here because scars are living proof of transformation. Every time you were drained, betrayed, or forgotten, you were left with marks that once felt like shame, but over time those wounds hardened into reminders. Scars are not weaknesses, they are evidence that you endured, that you faced the storm and walked out alive. When you look at them, you no longer feel only pain. You feel memory, wisdom, and survival. They are maps of the places where you almost broke, and yet did not. And so, instead of hiding them, you begin to carry them openly. They are your silent language, telling the world, I have been through fire, and I am still here. Scars become light, shining proof that your spirit cannot be destroyed. This awakening reshapes your relationship with others, where once you gave without pause, now you weigh every exchange with balance. You ask yourself, is this person drawing life from me, or are we breathing together? Is this relationship mutual, or is it consumption disguised as care? These questions guide you not toward isolation, but toward discernment. You no longer need hundreds of shallow connections. You begin to seek a few deep, nourishing ones. And in this seeking, you realize something profound. The more you value yourself, the more naturally you attract those who see your value too. Respect begins with you, and when you embody it, others either rise to meet it or fade away. This filtering process feels like loss at first, but soon it feels like liberation. And awakening also changes your sense of worth. You begin to see that you are not defined by what you give, but by what you are, even in stillness. Even if you do nothing, say nothing, offer nothing, you still exist in fullness. The very breath you carry is worthy. This realization is like a quiet revolution within you. No longer do you measure yourself by external validation or by how much you serve others. You learn to sit in your own company and feel complete. You learn that solitude is not emptiness but presence, and when you can sit with yourself without fear, no one can ever hold power over you again. That is the deepest form of freedom. Knowing that your existence does not depend on constant proof. There is light in this awakening, not the blinding kind that dazzles, but the soft, steady kind that guides. It is the light of self-awareness, of dignity, of boundaries held without apology. It is the kind of light that does not scream for attention, but radiates quietly, making others notice without knowing why. When you embody this light, you no longer need to fight to be seen. You no longer need to beg to be respected. Your presence itself communicates what words never could, that you know your worth. And once you know it, no one can diminish it, because value recognized from within can never be taken away from without. This is the quiet power that comes from awakening. It bends the world not through force but through clarity. And so, your strength is no longer about endurance but about choice. You choose where your energy flows, who receives your time, and what you allow into your life. You are no longer swayed by guilt or fear, because you have faced both and survived. You are not unkind, you are clear. You are not closed, you are selective. You are not bitter, you are awake, and in that wakefulness you find something you never had before. Peace, not the peace of being left alone, but the peace of knowing you can stand alone. Your strength is not loud, but it is unshakable. And when the world approaches you now, with its endless appetites and hidden motives, it finds not a weakened giver, but a soul standing firm, unmovable, untouchable, quietly radiant in its own self-worth. Everyone wants something from you. That will never change. The world is not built on pure intentions, but on endless exchanges, spoken and unspoken. Yet within this reality, you hold a choice. You can continue living as the one who bends until you break, pouring yourself into empty hands and waiting for recognition that will never come. Or you can shift, quietly, powerfully, into a new way of being, a way where you no longer resent others for their needs, because you see them for what they are, human. A way where you no longer burn yourself out proving you are worthy, Because worth is no longer something you chase, it is something you know. The revolution is not in changing the hunger of others, but in mastering your own response to it. That is where freedom begins. Not in the outer world, but in the inner one. When you see clearly, you stop expecting fairness from those who cannot give it. You stop longing for loyalty from those who never understood it. And instead of drowning in disappointment, you rise into clarity. The clarity that says, I will not be played, I will not be drained, I will not confuse being needed with being loved. This is not arrogance. It is survival. It is dignity. For too long, we have been taught that selflessness is the highest virtue. Yet selflessness without boundaries is simply self-erasure, and what use is giving if the one who gives is destroyed in the process? Strength is not about martyrdom. It is about preservation. The world may still want something from you, but now you decide how much you give, when you give, and to whom. That is the quiet power of awakening. The real revolution is inner transformation, outward victories. Money, status, recognition can all vanish in a single moment, taken by fortune or betrayal or time, but inner victories cannot be stolen. When you know who you are, when you know your worth, when you no longer measure yourself by the shifting desires of others, you become untouchable. People may still want from you, but they cannot drain you. They may still test you, but they cannot bend you. For you have built a fortress not of walls, but of awareness. And awareness is the only fortress no one can penetrate. It is the revolution that requires no noise, no spectacle, no applause. It is a revolution lived in silence. In the way you carry yourself, in the way you say no without guilt and yes without fear. This shift feels subtle at first, like a whisper in the soul, but it grows. You notice yourself speaking less but saying more. You notice you no longer feel the need to explain your decisions. You no longer argue with those who misunderstand you, because you know their misunderstanding is not your burden to correct. You no longer chase closeness with those who keep their distance. Instead, you allow distance to remain where it belongs, and as you stand in this new silence, you realize it is not loneliness. It is liberation. You have stopped needing validation to feel alive. You have stopped performing for approval. The mask falls away, and what remains is raw, unpolished, and profoundly true. Yourself. Everyone wants something from you. Some will come with kindness, some with manipulation, some with desperation. You cannot stop their wanting, but you can stop confusing their desire with your duty. You can stop carrying the weight of every unspoken expectation, and once you do, life changes in ways you never imagined. Relationships grow deeper because they are chosen, not forced. Work feels lighter because it no longer defines your value. Even solitude feels rich because you no longer see it as absence, but as presence, your own. This is the quiet miracle of transformation. The world remains hungry, but you are no longer starving. You walk through it full, not because you take more, but because you guard what is already within you. So when they approach you now, before they even speak, you already know. You see the motive, the mask, the hunger, but you are no longer swayed by it. You no longer bend to every request, nor do you rage against every demand. Instead, you stand steady, calm, clear-eyed, unmovable in your worth. You give when it aligns with your spirit, and you withhold when it threatens your peace. You have outplayed them, not by manipulation, but by mastery of yourself. That is the ultimate power, not control over others, but clarity within. And as you walk forward, you carry no banner, no noise, no performance. Only the silent revolution of one who has awakened. Only the unshakable presence of a soul that refuses to be bent.